I had been alone in my apartment for nearly 2 weeks. My roommate Jake was away on a business trip in Texas, leaving me with nothing but the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the old wooden floors. At first, I thought I'd enjoy the solitude. No interruptions, no need to be social, just me, my couch, and whatever Netflix had to offer. But solitude, I quickly learned, can become something else entirely once the sun sets. My apartment was on the third floor of an old building in Seattle. It wasn't fancy, but it was comfortable enough. During the day, everything felt normal. The sunlight streamed in through the windows. The noise of the city filtered through just enough to make me feel connected to the world outside. But at night, the silence grew thick, pressing down on me like a weight. It wasn't just quiet, it was too quiet. I remember the night everything changed. It was 12:30 a.m. when the doorbell rang. I nearly jumped out of my skin. No one ever came to visit me that late. Hell, no one ever came to visit me at all without texting first. I paused my show, sitting there in stunned silence. Maybe it was someone who had the wrong apartment. Maybe it was a package delivery, though that didn't make much sense at this hour. I stood up slowly, my stomach tightening as I crept toward the door. Peering through the peephole, I felt my breath catch in my throat. There was no one there. The hallway outside was empty, bathed in the dim yellow glow of the flickering overhead light. I stayed there, holding my breath, listening. Nothing. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe it was just some kid playing a prank. Shaking my head, I turned away and walked back to the couch. But just as I sat down, the doorbell rang again. Then, 3 hard knocks. I dropped the remote. A rush of adrenaline surged through my veins as I spun back toward the door. This time, I didn't hesitate. I pressed my eye to the peephole, scanning the hallway. Still nothing. But just as I was about to step back, I saw it. The faintest hint of movement at the edge of the frame. Someone was there. I saw the blur of a shoe, the hem of a pant leg. Whoever it was, they were deliberately standing just out of view. A cold, primal fear crept up my spine. Was it a lost stranger? A neighbor in need? A burglar trying to lure me outside? My brain spun through possibilities, but my hand stayed glued to the door. I swallowed hard. I should have called out, but my throat felt too dry. Minutes passed. I waited. Finally, I stepped back, reaching for the deadbolt and sliding the chain lock into place. If someone wanted to get in, they'd have to break the door down. I sat back down on the couch, heart pounding, trying to pretend like I wasn't rattled, but I couldn't focus. Every little noise outside made me jump. The low hum of the air conditioning, the creak of the pipes, all of it felt too loud, too wrong. By the time 1:30 a.m. rolled around, I forced myself to go to bed. Before I did, I checked every window, every lock. Everything was secure. Everything was safe. At least, that's what I told myself. I left my bedside lamp on and lay there, scrolling mindlessly through my phone, trying to push the uneasy feeling away. Eventually, exhaustion won out. My phone slipped from my hand and I drifted into sleep. I woke up at 3:14 a.m. Something wasn't right. At first, I wasn't sure what had pulled me from sleep. The room was quiet. The bedside lamp was still on, casting soft yellow light across the walls. Then I heard it. A soft shuffling sound. It wasn't coming from the hallway. It wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from inside my room. From under my bed, a bolt of ice shot through my veins. I lay there completely still, my breathing shallow, my body refusing to move. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself it was just my apartment settling, just the floorboards shifting. But then the sound came again, closer, heavier, and then silence. A silence so thick, so complete, I could hear my own pulse pounding in my ears. I wanted to believe I was imagining it, that I was still half dreaming. But deep down, I knew. There was someone in my room. There was someone under my bed. I forced myself to breathe slowly, evenly, pretending I was still asleep. My mind raced. If I moved, would they grab me? If I screamed, would they attack? Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw it. The bed frame rattled. Just slightly. Something was crawling out. A man. The dim glow from the street lamp outside my window cast enough light to outline him. He was tall, dressed in dark clothes, his face turned away from me. He just stood there, motionless, listening to my breathing. I have never felt terror like that before. My entire body screamed at me to run, to scream, to fight, but I did nothing. I lay there, silent, motionless, hoping, praying that he wouldn't notice I was awake. After what felt like an eternity, he started to move. Not fast, not sudden. He backed away, step by step, his movements slow, deliberate. He reached the doorway, then he slipped into the hallway. For a long moment, I could still hear my blood thundering in my ears. Then the apartment door creaked open and closed, and then nothing. I don't remember how long I lay there, too scared to move, but eventually I did. I lunged for my phone, hands shaking so badly I could barely type. 911, what's your emergency? I barely managed to whisper. Someone was in my apartment. The police arrived within minutes, guns drawn. I met them at my bedroom door, still trembling. They searched every inch of the apartment. They found nothing. No signs of forced entry, no broken windows, no damaged locks. I told them everything, from the doorbell ringing to the man crawling out from under my bed. They reassured me, saying maybe it was an intruder who slipped in earlier when I wasn't paying attention. But there was one thing they couldn't explain. How had he gotten in? Or worse, how long had he been hiding there? The next few nights, I didn't sleep. I kept the lights on. I checked under the bed every few hours like a terrified child. When Jake finally returned from his trip, I never told him the full story. I just said someone had tried to break in, but deep down, I knew. It wasn't just a break-in. He had been in my apartment. He had been watching me sleep, and the most terrifying part, I never heard him leave. I didn't sleep for 3 nights after that. Every sound in my apartment sent me into a panic. The air conditioning clicking on made my pulse spike. The creak of the pipes in the walls had me gripping the sheets, convinced someone was there. I checked under my bed a dozen times, half expecting to see a pair of eyes staring back at me from the darkness. But nothing happened. No more knocks at the door, no shadowy figures lurking in the hallway. It was almost worse that way. Like the moment I let my guard down, it would happen again, and maybe worse. By the 4th night, exhaustion got the better of me. I collapsed into bed, and for the first time in days, fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. That's why I didn't hear my phone ringing the first time, or the second. But the 3rd time it woke me. The vibration rattled against my nightstand, pulling me out of my much-needed rest. Groggy, I squinted at the screen. Unknown caller. I frowned. Who the hell calls at 3:12 a.m.? I let it go to voicemail. I wasn't dealing with that, but as I turned over, trying to reclaim sleep, it rang again. Unknown caller. My stomach tightened, a cold sense of déjà vu gripped me, like the feeling I had when I saw that man stepping out from under my bed. My instincts screamed at me, don't answer it, but my exhaustion mixed with something I couldn't name made me swipe the screen. I held the phone to my ear. Hello? Silence. Not the kind of silence where someone is waiting for you to speak. This was heavy silence, like someone was there, listening. I pulled the phone away and stared at the screen. The call was still connected. I hesitated, then tried again. Who is this? The silence stretched, and then I heard it, breathing. Slow, deliberate breathing. I shot upright in bed, my body rigid. My fingers gripped the phone tighter. The breath on the other end was too calm, too controlled. It wasn't accidental, like someone had called me by mistake. This was deliberate. Someone wanted me to hear them. My voice came out sharper than I expected. Who the hell is this? The breathing continued. Long inhale, long exhale. Like whoever was on the other end had all the time in the world. I hung up. A cold sweat broke out along my back. My apartment suddenly felt too big, like there were places someone could be hiding. The kitchen, the closet, the hallway just beyond my bedroom door. I listened, my own breath shaky, but nothing moved. Then my phone rang again. I almost dropped it. My heart slammed against my ribs as I looked down. Unknown caller. I stared at it, let it ring, let it go to voicemail, but it started again, and again, and again. I wanted to ignore it, but a sickening feeling was forming in my gut. I needed to know. I needed to hear what they were going to say. With a deep breath, I answered. For a long moment, there was nothing. No breathing this time. Just silence, and then, just above a whisper, a voice said, "Mark!" My stomach dropped, hearing my name from a stranger's lips. No, not a stranger. This voice knew me. The way they said it, the way they stretched out the last syllable, like they'd spoken it before, like they had whispered it in the dark while I was sleeping. My voice came out strained. "Who are you?" No answer. But then, slowly, the voice began reciting things about me. My birthday, my mother's maiden name, the make and model of my car. Each fact dropped like a hammer in my chest. I felt like I was suffocating, like my lungs refused to work. How did they know? "I'm calling the police," I snapped. My voice was shaking, but I didn't care. "I swear to God, if you don't tell me who you are." The voice laughed. Not loudly, not maniacally, just a quiet, amused chuckle, like they found something deeply funny about my threat. Then, click, the call disconnected. I sat there, gripping my phone so hard my knuckles turned white. My pulse was hammering in my ears. I should have called the police right then and there, but I didn't. Maybe because I knew what they'd say. No crime was committed, no threats, no demand, just a phone call, a deeply disturbing phone call, but still, nothing they could do. But the worst part, the calls didn't stop. The next night, it started again, 3:14 a.m., unknown caller. I didn't answer this time. I let it ring. But then, as soon as it stopped, it started again, over and over, every few minutes like clockwork. I turned my phone off, but when I turned it back on in the morning, there were 37 missed calls. 37. That's when I called the police. They took my statement, said they'd look into it. They traced the number back to a landline in my own apartment building. That's when the fear turned to something else, something colder. The police checked the unit it belonged to. It was an empty apartment, had been for 6 months. No tenants, no phone installed. They told me it was probably some kind of technical error, some old disconnected line picking up interference, but they didn't sound convinced, and neither was I. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on my couch with a baseball bat in my lap, waiting for the call to come again. It didn't. For the next few nights, silence. No more calls, no more breathing. I convinced myself it was over. And then, 3 days later, I got a text. A single text, from a new unknown number. Running doesn't help. I felt my body lock up, fingers frozen around my phone, like they knew I was thinking of leaving, like they were still watching, like they were waiting. I packed a bag that night. By morning, I was gone. I don't tell many people this story, mostly because they don't believe me. The police never found who was behind the calls. I changed my number. I moved across the country. But some nights, when I wake up for no reason at 3:14 a.m., I stare at my phone screen and feel the same paralyzing fear. Because I know, someday, the phone will ring again. And this time, I don't think they'll stop at just listening. I left Denver the next morning. I didn't even bother breaking my lease. I packed my things in a single night, threw everything into my car and drove. I didn't have a plan. I just needed to be anywhere but there. The calls had stopped, but I knew they would start again. I ended up in Austin. It wasn't planned. I had an old friend who let me crash on his couch until I found a place of my own. A fresh start, a new number, a new city where no one knew me, where they couldn't find me. For a while it worked. The nightmares didn't go away, though. I still woke up at 3:14 a.m. some nights, drenched in sweat, convinced I heard my phone ringing. But it never was. It was just my mind playing tricks on me. That's what I told myself. Then, one evening I came home from work and saw the package. It was sitting right outside my apartment door. A plain brown box, no return address. My stomach dropped. At first I told myself it was something I had ordered and forgotten about. A late-night impulse buy, a package meant for my neighbor, misplaced. But as I bent down to pick it up, I saw it. My name, handwritten, not in neat printed letters. The handwriting was messy, almost hurried, as if someone had scrawled it down at the last second before leaving it at my door. I stood there, holding it, my fingers cold against the cardboard. I didn't open it right away. I don't know why. I just stood there for a long moment, my heart thudding in my chest. Then, cautiously, I carried it inside. I placed it on my kitchen table, staring at it like it might move on its own. Then, with a deep breath, I grabbed a knife and sliced the tape. The first thing I saw was keys. A small bundle of keys attached to a simple metal ring. I frowned. They weren't mine. They weren't the keys to my apartment, or to my car. They were old, the metal slightly rusted, like they'd been used for years. I set them aside and pulled out the next item, a Polaroid photograph. My breath caught in my throat. It was my apartment, a photo taken from outside, across the street. I could see my own living room window, the light still on. The worst part? The photo had been taken last night. I felt my pulse skyrocket, my vision blurring at the edges. My hands were shaking as I reached into the box again, pulling out the final item, a small slip of paper. 4 words, deliver at 9 p.m. I sat on my couch for the next hour, staring at the contents of the box, trying to make sense of it, the keys, the photo, the message. I checked the locks on my door. I checked the windows. I paced my apartment, every nerve in my body on high alert. By 8:30, I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to deliver anything. I wasn't going to play along. But I needed to know who had left this for me. At exactly 8:58 p.m., I turned off all the lights in my apartment. I moved to the window, standing just out of sight, watching. And I waited. The street was quiet. A few cars passed. Then, at 9:03 p.m., a man appeared. He stepped out from the shadows across the street, moving toward my building. I couldn't see his face. He was wearing a hood, his hands stuffed into his pockets. He stopped just outside my door. Waiting, my breath hitched. He wasn't knocking. He wasn't ringing the doorbell. He was just standing there. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just watched. A full minute passed. Then another. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he turned and walked away. I stayed frozen in place until I was sure he was gone. Then, with shaking hands, I grabbed my phone and called the police. The officers arrived within 20 minutes. They searched the building, checked the security cameras, but there was nothing. No clear footage of the man's face, no sign of forced entry, just a box left outside my door. I showed them the contents, the note, the photograph. They took it all into evidence, but I could see it on their faces. They didn't think it was a real threat, just a weird coincidence. "You probably got the wrong package," one of them said. "Maybe some prank." I didn't argue. I just nodded, knowing they wouldn't believe me if I told them the truth, that this wasn't random, that this wasn't a mistake, that they had found me again. I barely slept that night. I sat up in bed, staring at the door, waiting for the sound of footsteps outside. Nothing came. But the next morning when I stepped outside to leave for work, I stopped dead in my tracks. Because there was another package, smaller this time, a simple envelope, and inside was another photograph. This time, it wasn't of my apartment. It was of me, taken from my bedroom window. I hadn't seen anyone. I hadn't heard anyone, but they had been there, watching me, waiting. I turned around, my heart pounding, my eyes scanning the street. But just like the night before, there was no one there. I called the police again. They came. They took the photo. They said they'd investigate, but I knew they wouldn't find anything, because whoever was doing this wasn't going to let them. That night, I didn't stay in my apartment. I packed a bag and checked into a hotel across town, and as I lay there in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling, I realized something. The package, the keys, the note, it wasn't for me. It was for someone else. Someone was supposed to come at 9 p.m. Someone was supposed to use those keys, and when they found the door locked, when they saw that I hadn't played along, they would come back, and next time, they wouldn't leave a package. They'd come inside. I didn't go back to my apartment, not after that. I packed my things. I left Austin. I changed my number. For weeks, I kept expecting another package to show up. to open my door and find another envelope waiting for me, but it never came. It took me a long time to stop looking over my shoulder, a long time to stop waking up in the middle of the night, convinced someone was standing in the darkness, and maybe, eventually, I'll start to believe that it's over, that I got away. But there's still one thing that haunts me. Who was supposed to get in, and what would have happened if I had let them? Leaving Austin wasn't an option, not yet. I couldn't run again, not so soon, but staying in my apartment after what happened with the package felt impossible. Every night I double-checked the locks, then triple-checked them. I moved furniture against the door. I barely slept. Every little noise made me sit up, heart pounding, expecting to see a silhouette standing at the foot of my bed, but it never came. Instead, the paranoia followed me everywhere. Every time I stepped outside, I felt watched. Not in the way you sometimes feel eyes on you in a crowded room, but something deeper, more personal, like someone had memorized the way I moved, the routes I took home, the way I always hesitated before unlocking my door. It was suffocating. That's why, when I saw a listing for a small rental house on the outskirts of the city, I jumped on it. It wasn't much. An older place, slyly run down, but it was mine. No shared hallways, no close neighbors, just distance. I thought I could breathe again. I was wrong. The first week in the new house was uneventful. No strange packages, no midnight phone calls. I forced myself to relax, to believe that whoever had been watching me, whoever had left that package at my apartment, hadn't followed me here. And then, one night, it started. It was just past midnight when I noticed it. I had been up late working one of my freelance gigs, something to keep my mind occupied, when a strange feeling crept over me, the kind that makes your skin prickle, your stomach tighten for no reason at all. I looked up from my laptop, ears straining for any sound. Silence. But the feeling didn't go away. I turned toward the window, and my breath caught in my throat. There was a man standing outside. He was partially hidden behind the trees, just at the edge of my yard. The porch light cast his figure in a dim, hazy glow, but I could see enough. He wasn't moving. He wasn't shifting his weight. He was just standing there, watching. I stared at him, frozen. For a long moment, neither of us moved. I wanted to believe I was imagining things, that my overworked brain was making shapes out of the shadows. But then, he took a step closer, a slow, deliberate step. I shot up from my chair so fast it nearly toppled over. My first instinct was to grab my phone. My fingers were shaking as I unlocked it, ready to call 911. And then he was gone, just like that. 1 second he was there, and the next, the trees were empty. I stood there, breathing hard, my pulse hammering in my ears. Had I imagined it? No, I knew what I saw. I waited, watching the yard for any sign of movement. Nothing. Finally, after what felt like forever, I forced myself to move. I checked the locks. Front door, back door, windows, everything was secure. Still, I barely slept that night. Every creak of the house made me jolt upright, heart pounding. By morning, it almost felt like a dream, a trick of the light. That's what I told myself. And then, the phone rang. I had changed my number when I moved. There was no way anyone, especially them, could have it. But when I looked down at the screen, my stomach twisted. Unknown caller. The memories of Denver came flooding back. The breathing, the laughter, the way they knew me. I didn't answer, but then it rang again, and again. By the fifth call, I turned my phone off, but the fear didn't go away. That night, I didn't sit by the window. I didn't even look outside. I locked the doors early, pulled the curtains shut, and tried to convince myself that nothing was wrong. I was on edge for hours, waiting for something to happen, but nothing did, until 2:43 a.m. That's when my phone, which was still powered off, buzzed against the nightstand. I sat up, heart racing. The screen was dark, no missed calls, no notifications, but I had heard it. A vibration, a buzz. The moment I reached for it, the window creaked. I went completely still. It wasn't loud, just a subtle, slow shift of wood and glass, like someone had barely pressed against it. I turned my head toward the window. The curtains were moving, just slightly, barely noticeable, but I saw it. Someone was outside, watching, listening, waiting. A surge of cold terror shot through me. I grabbed the bat I kept beside my bed, forced myself to my feet and took one step closer. Knock, knock, knock. I nearly dropped the bat. The sound didn't come from the front door. It came from the window. A quiet, patient knock. A knock that said, "I know you're awake." I gritted my teeth, gripping the bat tighter. I wanted to call the police. I wanted to scream. But instead, I took another step forward, heart hammering. With one quick motion, I yanked the curtains open. There was nothing there. No one standing outside, no footprints in the dirt, just the reflection of my own wide-eyed expression staring back at me in the glass. But something was wrong. The window had been locked before I went to bed. Now it was unlatched. The police came. They searched the yard, the surrounding area. They found nothing. No signs of forced entry, no evidence that anyone had been there at all. The responding officer, a guy named Torres, tried to be reassuring, told me it was probably an animal, or maybe the wind. But I saw it in his face. He didn't believe it either. Before he left, he paused in the doorway. "If you notice anything else, weird, call us right away." I nodded, but I knew I wouldn't, because this wasn't something the police could help with. This wasn't random. They had followed me. I didn't sleep the next night, or the night after that. I started seeing shadows where there were none, faces in reflections that weren't mine. Every time I passed a window, I felt the same crawling sensation on my skin, like someone was just out of sight, waiting for me to turn around. And then, a week later, I woke up to a single text message from an unknown number. "You left the window unlocked again." My hands went ice cold. I forced myself to type back, "Who is this?" No response. I checked the windows, all locked, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it didn't matter, because they weren't just watching anymore. They had been inside. I didn't stay in the house after that night. After the text, after the window, without a doubt, that they had been inside. I packed what little I had and left. I didn't have a plan. I just drove. Boston was never meant to be a permanent stop. It was just far enough. A place where no one knew me, where the past couldn't follow. A friend of a friend helped me find a job. I didn't ask too many questions. Just a small gig at the university, something easy to keep me afloat. The school had an old dormitory with a few open rooms, and I took one without hesitation. It wasn't much, but it had locks, and for a while that was enough. The room was on the 4th floor, room 405. It was small, barely enough space for a twin bed, a desk, and a closet that smelled like it hadn't been opened in years. But it was cheap, and more importantly, it was mine. At first it felt safe, the kind of safe I hadn't felt in a long time, and then, on my third night, I woke up at 3 a.m. to the sound of someone knocking. It wasn't loud, just 3 soft, deliberate knocks against my door. I sat up, my body frozen in that half-awake state where fear doesn't fully register yet. I waited. Nothing. I swallowed hard, trying to shake the uneasy feeling creeping into my bones. The building was old. Maybe it was just the pipes, the wood shifting in the walls. That's what I told myself. And then... knock, knock, knock. My breath caught in my throat. I turned toward the door, barely able to make out the sliver of dim hallway light beneath it. A shadow passed by. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. And then, just as suddenly as it had come, the presence was gone. By morning, it almost felt like a dream. I told myself it was exhaustion, that I had imagined the shadow, that the knocking was just some late-night drunk mistaking my door for someone else's. I tried to forget about it, until the next night. At exactly 3 a.m., I woke up again. Not to knocking this time, to something else, a soft rustling sound. It came from the floor, from the closet. My heart started pounding as I slowly turned my head toward it. The door was closed, just as I had left it, but something was behind it. I could hear it, breathing. I sat up slowly, every muscle in my body tense. The breath was shallow, quiet, like whoever or whatever was in there didn't want me to know. My fingers clenched around my phone. I didn't know if I should run, if I should open the closet and face whatever was inside. And then, just as quickly as it had started, the breathing stopped. The silence was somehow worse. I forced myself to move, to get out. I grabbed my keys, my bag, anything within reach, and yanked open the door to the hallway. The corridor was empty. I stood there, heart pounding, waiting for something, anything, to happen. Nothing did. I didn't go back inside that night. By the next day, I had convinced myself, again, that it was nothing, that it had been in my head, that moving so many times, running so much, had made me paranoid. That's when I found the note. A small, folded piece of paper slid beneath my door, with only 6 words written in shaky, uneven handwriting. Get out before it's too late. I reported it to campus security. They weren't helpful. No cameras in the hallways, no one had seen anything. They suggested it was just a prank, some bored student messing with the new guy in 4-5. But as I stood in my room that night, staring at the closet door, I knew it wasn't a joke. Someone or something was in this room, and I wasn't alone. I started digging, talking to people, asking carefully chosen questions. The dorm had been around for decades, almost a century. People came and went. But room 405, it had been empty last semester, and the semester before that. No one stayed in room 405, not for long. There were rumors about a girl, a student from years ago who had disappeared in the middle of the night, vanished without a trace. The only thing left behind was her room key, still inside, just like those keys in the package. I started sleeping with the lights on, keeping my shoes by the bed just in case I needed to run. I checked the closet every night before going to sleep. And then one night, as I lay there, forcing myself to rest, something changed. I heard a sound. Not knocking, not breathing, something shifting. I turned my head and saw it. The closet door was open, just an inch, not enough to be obvious, but enough to let me know that someone had been inside, had been watching, and I had slept through it. I left the next day. Didn't tell anyone, didn't file another report. I packed my things, dropped my keys at the front desk, and walked out of that building without looking back. I found a new place across the city, a tiny apartment, overpriced and barely furnished. But I didn't care. I just needed walls. I just needed distance. I told myself it was over, that I was safe again. But sometimes, late at night, I catch my reflection in the bathroom mirror, and for just a second, just before I look away, I see her. A girl with dark, empty eyes, standing just behind me, watching, waiting, like she never really left. I never spoke about room 45 after I left, not to anyone. I told myself it was over, that I had escaped whatever was lurking in that dorm. But the truth was, I had never really left it behind, because some nights I still felt it, that presence, that weight in the darkness, like something was just waiting. That's why, when I got an offer for a job in Vermont, I took it without hesitation. A small town clinic, quiet and uneventful, exactly what I needed. A place where I could disappear, start over, and for a while I convinced myself that I had finally outrun it, until the letters started coming. The first one arrived on a Monday. I found it waiting in my mailbox, buried under a stack of bills and junk mail, a plain white envelope, no return address. At first I thought nothing of it, maybe an appointment reminder, something from the clinic. Then I opened it and froze. Inside was a single sheet of paper, and written in neat, careful handwriting were 6 words. I saw you reading this letter. My stomach dropped. I looked around, scanning the empty street, the houses across from mine. Nothing. The air felt too still, like the town itself was holding its breath. I went inside, locked the door, and tried to shake it off. A joke. That's all it was, some dumb prank. I told myself that, and I might have believed it if the second letter hadn't come the next day. This time, I didn't even touch it at first. I just stood at my mailbox, staring at the envelope like it might move on its own. It looked exactly the same, plain, unmarked. I forced myself to open it. Inside was a photograph. My house, taken from the street, taken last night. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Someone had been here. Someone had been watching. I turned in a slow circle, scanning every yard, every window. No movement, no cars slowing down, nothing. But that was the worst part, because whoever was doing this wasn't just watching, they wanted me to know. I went inside, I locked the doors, I checked the windows twice, but I didn't call the police. Not yet, because what was I supposed to tell them? That someone left me a creepy letter? That someone had taken a picture of my house? I already knew how that conversation would go, so instead, I waited, and by Friday, the third letter arrived. This time, I felt sick before I even opened it. My hands trembled as I tore the envelope. A single sentence written in the same precise, deliberate handwriting. I am inside. The breath left my lungs, my grip on the paper tightened. My first instinct was to run. Get out. Drive. Don't stop until I hit the next town. But then, I heard it. A floorboard creaked. Not outside, not in the yard, inside my house. I grabbed the nearest thing, a fireplace poker, and moved. Every part of me screamed to get out, but I had to know. I searched the living room first. Empty. The kitchen, empty. Then I reached the hallway. The door to my bedroom was open. I knew for a fact I had closed it that morning. My pulse pounded in my ears as I stepped inside. Nothing looked out of place, nothing was missing, but something was wrong, I could feel it. I turned toward my closet. The door was slightly ajar, not wide open, just enough. I swallowed hard, raising the poker. With one quick motion, I yanked the door open. Nothing, just rows of hanging clothes. But then, I saw the letter, taped to the inside of the closet door. I reached for it with shaking hands. This one was different. Not typed, not printed. It was written in blood. 4 words. I was just here. I left. I didn't pack. I didn't wait. I got in my car and drove. I checked into a motel in the next town, locked the door, and sat on the bed, gripping my phone like a lifeline. Finally, I called the police. They came, they searched the house, but just like before, they found nothing. No forced entry, no prints, no sign that anyone had ever been there at all. But I knew better, because when I checked my phone later that night, there was one last message from an unknown number. It was a photo, a picture of me, sleeping in my motel room. I left Vermont the next morning, changed my number, changed everything, and for a long time, I thought that was the end of it. Until yesterday, when I came home to my new apartment in California and checked the mail, there was an envelope, plain, unmarked. I almost didn't open it, but I did, and inside, written in the same familiar handwriting, were 4 simple words. Did you miss me? Horror stories aren't just about making your skin crawl or keeping you up at night. They're warnings, reminders that the world isn't always as safe as we believe it to be. Each of the 6 stories I've shared with you carries a lesson that, if ignored, could cost someone their life. Mark ignored the unease he felt after the late-night knocking. He dismissed the strange sensation of being watched, but when the man crawled out from under his bed, it was already too late. If something feels off, it probably is. Listen to that voice in the back of your head. It's trying to protect you. Ethan thought his phone calls were just a prank, until his caller knew his name, his birthday, his car, and his mother's maiden name. In today's world, your personal information is more vulnerable than you realize. Be mindful of what you share, and if you ever feel like you're being watched, you probably are. Sarah opened her door to find a package that wasn't meant for her, but for the person who was supposed to break into her home. Not every unexpected gift is a harmless mistake. If something feels wrong, report it, get away from it, but don't play along. Daniel thought he was looking out of his window, but someone else was looking in. The most terrifying monsters aren't the ones hiding in the dark. They're the ones waiting for you to notice them. Always be aware of your surroundings, because you never know who might be standing just outside. Olivia ignored the warnings. She stayed in room 405 despite the knocking, the whispering, the shifting shadows in her closet. If a place has a history of people vanishing, of doors opening on their own, of unseen eyes watching from the mirrors, leave. Don't wait for the story to end. Walk away before you become part of it. Henry ignored the letters at first. He dismissed them as a joke, a prank, a mistake. But by the time he realized someone had been inside his home, inside his room while he slept, it was too late. When someone is leaving messages, photographs, and warnings, they aren't just playing games. They are letting you know they can get to you, and if you don't leave, they will. If there's one thing all of these stories have in common, it's this. The real horror isn't ghosts or demons. It's people. It's the ones who watch without you knowing. The ones who listen when you think you're alone. The ones who know where you sleep and want you to know it. You don't have to believe in the supernatural to be afraid of the dark. Because sometimes, the scariest thing out there isn't what you can't see. It's what's already watching you. If these stories made you think twice before checking your locks, before answering unknown calls, before assuming you're alone, then we've done our job. Horror isn't just entertainment, it's a lesson in survival. If you've ever had an experience that left you cold, that made you question whether something or someone was out there, share it in the comments. You never know who might need to hear it. And before you go, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and share this video with someone who needs a reminder that the world is a little darker than we like to believe. Stay safe, stay aware, and remember, just because you can't see them doesn't mean they aren't there. Thank you for listening. We'll see you in the next nightmare.